America, my name is Osei-Frimpong, and you're watching this week's edition of the Black Athenians, and I come to you every Friday, around 4, but sometimes a little bit later, and talk to you about political philosophy in a way that makes sense in your local government, but also anywhere there are poor black people surrounded by better to do white people, which is a lot of places in these United States, right? So the goal is to transmit the quality of political education that will help you in your struggles make sense of your life and preferably stop blaming yourself for being broke, and teach how to fight white people, because fighting white people is a skill. I get in a lot of trouble for saying that, but it's just true. It's not something you just kind of get birthed out of the womb knowing how to do. You got to practice it and get your arguments right, and then become a tactician. So fighting white people is a skill, and that's what you need. It's a skill you need to learn if you are serious about securing justice for black communities. Actually, even if you're white, it's a skill you need if you want to secure justice for anybody, because what you're securing right now is or what you're taught to secure right now is a form of oppression or white supremacy or hierarchy that's not really working it particularly well for anyone. But like I said, I'm trying to give you the quality of arguments that will help you make this country whole. And if you make the country whole, that means you'll probably end up making your job whole. It means making your family whole. So I'm preaching the gospel of wholeness here. And I'm doing it every Friday at 4, sometimes a little bit later. So today we're going to talk about the problems with the sentimental left. The sentimental left, the progressive parts of the United States that think that they can, win elections and win power simply by playing on the sentiments of the electorate. You see a picture of kids in cages and you're like, that's wrong, vote for me, or pass this policy. Or you see a picture of some degraded condition and it dramatizes a horrible thing, but it turns out that the other guys win. And you don't know why, right? I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you the perks of the sentimental left, and I'm also going to tell you why we need actually to draw arguments about freedom. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how cute the kids are in cages. If the other side's talking about freedom, is willing to fight for freedom, collateral damage is what it is. So I'm going to hit the beat with the opening, and I'll see you in a few.
To the beat,
Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I paint the White House black and it can feature in your front.
So there are a few structural problems with the sentimental left. The sentimental left thinks it can win both the arguments and win power and win justice by playing on people's feelings. That's not going to work for a few reasons. One, feelings are individual or particular. I'm going to go with individual here. In the same way you can't make someone be hungry, and you can't eat yourself and have them be satisfied. You can't depend on someone else's feelings. You can't feel their feelings for them, right? And their feelings are going to be fickle because they're completely unaccountable to everything else in the world. Their feelings, and they can't be reasoned with or contested and they're not publicly accountable. So you're pretty much depending on magic. You're out there depending on white people's feelings to do good. You're pretty much depending on magic. If you think that feelings are going to win justice against real power, or even against an argument, right? So the sentimental left thinks, and honestly, since it's my show, I can just say it. You got a lot of women out there who are used to people feeling sorry for themselves. So they take that lived experience and put that into kind of political wisdom and are surprised when people don't give a shit about them. Or are surprised when power does what power does. So I think it's unfortunate that on the left we think that feelings are going to win the day. And for the reason that feelings are individual or at least particular. They're not universal. You can't argue from a place of them and expect that to actually make sense. To like literally, like to be reasonable, and to secure people freedom. Because in the contest between making people feel bad and securing people freedom, people are going to choose freedom, or at least the kind of people who live meaningful lives. So the idea that feelings can be turned into meaning as solidly as freedom can be turned into meaning is unfortunate. And it's it's inefficacious, and it's unfortunate, and that's what's at stake here. That's what's at stake here. Something that's going to be meaningful is going to be something that's universal. It's not going to be a feeling. Someone else's feeling is not going to be unforgettable. Someone else's argument might be. People forget, like, You've Lost That Lovin' Feeling is a song that happens all the time. And first of all, this is why, you need a marriage that's held together by vows and not feelings. My wife's a pastor, and every now and then someone runs their vows by their very homemade vows, and then they feel very special because the vows came from their heart and they're homemade, except the vows aren't really vows. They're kind of like bad poetry. So she has to break to them like, all right, so this is nice bad poetry you've written, but like there are no promises. There are no vows. This is just an expression of feelings. And they want to build their marriage on an expression of feelings and not any sort of like worked out sense of like responsibility. And you know where that marriage ends up? It ends up in divorce. Or it ends up in disappointment. It definitely ends up, well, it depends on the social set of the people who think they can build a life on feelings. But usually that ends up in like therapy and pills and unfortunate confused kids, right? So you need actually a pretty robust sense of responsibility to do anything that's meaningful, right? And to turn feelings into meaning doesn't work. Even we try to argue for something like healthcare from a place of feelings as opposed to a place of like, look, I need to be able to be healthy in order for me to be free, in order for me to actually do things that are meaningful. Health itself is not meaningful. I would rather be, out of pain than in pain. But that's not what they're going to say about my funeral, at my funeral. He lived a life free of pain. That's not going to what they say at the funeral. They're going to talk about what I did. So I need to be free of pain in order to do something. So something like healthcare is an enabling condition, but it's just an enabling condition. It's not itself a substance of freedom. It allows me it keeps me from being distracted by pain from doing something that actually matters, right? This is why people often resent their health bill more than like actually breaking an arm or getting a bad diagnosis. Because the health bill means now that I have to commit so-and-so amount of hours of my life. I have to commit so-and-so amount of hours of my life or an infinite amount of hours of my life in order to pay off this bill. And that's worse than the cancer diagnosis. So there's a lot tied together. This politics of sentimentality, while it really seems attractive and it seems like it's going to work, it's ultimately going to live in heartache from people who are not sentimental, who are going to be fighting from an ideology of freedom, right? And freedom is a universal, so they're going to be willing to die for it. And another thing about sentimentality, insofar as it's particular or individual, depending on how you parse it, is that nobody's willing to die for it. It exists in that person. And so they're not going to be willing to die for it, as opposed to an idea, which is as a concept is universal and meaningful in a different way, and can expect other people to appreciate the meaning of it too. And like I said, it's going to be something that if you die for an idea, it's going to be something that's meaningful and memorable. If you die for a feeling, you just look like a hedonist. There's one thing to die for freedom. It's another thing to die for, I don't know, the good lay. One person's a freedom fighter. The other person's has has a problem as a sex addict. So sentiment is always going to lead to deficient politics. There's a great section at the end of Plato's Republic. It's called the myth of The myth of has this guy who actually, he lived a good life, but he didn't live a good life because he actually understood anything about living a good life. He lived a good life because he was just taught well and he had good habits. He was well-mannered. He didn't understand anything, but he was well-mannered. But it turns out that if you live a good life because you're well-mannered, but you don't actually understand, you don't understand reasons for doing what you do, you just happen to do it because that's how you're taught to do it. One, you're easily convinced and easily seduced because you have no reason giving you stability. Right? You have nothing that's actually grounding you. All you have is manners. And when you're hit with a new seduction, you're going to be completely vulnerable to it because you don't have any mannered antibodies. So just if your politics is based on sentimentality, you don't want anything based on sentimentality, right? You don't want your job to be based on your boss feeling sorry for you. If your job is based on your boss feeling sorry for you, what happens when they wake up and they don't feel sorry for you? Or they have a worse day than you do? Or when you have a good run? Right? If your job is based on them feeling sorry for you, then there's no reason or stability except for their capricious appetites that keeps you employed. You do not want that. Once again, I'm not going to talk bad about the feminists who screw up left politics, but just know that if a politics is based on someone else pitying you, it's not going to be of the most robust quality of politics. I'll say that. Right? But we all owe each other rights in a way that you can actually build a politics out of. So instead of building it out of a politics of sentimentality, we should build it out of politics out of right. But you actually have to do work to figure out what freedom looks like in the world and how it gets institutionalized and all these variegated institutions and why I need libraries to be free. Not because they make me feel good, but because I need information equal access to information in order to be a responsible citizen. Right? I say libraries because at the end of this pandemic, when it's going to be time to cut budgets if the federal government doesn't do its job, these kinds of institutions that we just kind of liked because we happen to like, but we didn't actually have reason to support, are going to need reasons to support or they will be cut. Right? Sentimentality or nostalgia will not sustain, won't even sustain the USPS. So, and black people, that's especially important to us because if they get rid of the post office, that's us. More black people work for the post office than they do anything else. The post office hires us. So that's where we are. We cannot base our politics off of feeling. But what we can do is base a politics off of respect for right and freedom. Right? And right next to the politics of sentimentality that gets problems, that gives you problems, is going to be a politics of, let's call it materialism. It's the idea that matter is what really matters, not ideas. Matter is what really matters, and that's good. Materialism is good. Materialist politics is good insofar as it could actually theorize conflict. It can get you to understand no, your boss is looking to exploit you for cheap. You're not going to really talk them into being just to you. You need to fight them. So that's about power. So we get some aspects of labor relations correct, but thoroughgoing materialism, once again, if everything is about matter and not ideas are universal, but your matter is just kind of what you kind of are made up of. It's about you. It individualizes what are really political struggles and ideological struggles. Materialism is important because because for most of human history, the people who thought of politics well actually understood that matter is less important, or it's not even real. Matter might not even be real. Ideas are real. Forms are real. Matter itself is nothing until it becomes something because we imbue it. A chair is not a chair because of what it's made out of. A chair is a chair because it allows me to sit. right? So it's not like the stuff that makes it what it is. It's in the right form, and that form can hold my tuchus in it. But most of the Western history, form was what things were, what they allowed you to do, what their purpose was. And if they serve their purpose, they are what they are. And if they didn't serve their purpose, they're not what they're not. It doesn't matter what it's made out of. It matters what it does and how it functions. So the materialists go the other way and say, like, well, this is kind of early modern to modern, kind of the scientific revolution, and just kind of the idea that matter is actually what's really real. And all of these ideas we have, including religion, some of the hardcore materialists says are just epiphenomenal. They are what emerges out of matter kind of considering itself in a certain way, or matter impinging itself on a certain way. Right, so they try to make a science out of political movements, and they think freedom is an illusion or just an idea that we tell ourselves. That's going to be a problem because, first of all, materialist explanations can't actually explain everything. I don't have there's no pill I can take that makes me feel like I fulfilled a promise. Right? If everything's just matter, there should be a way that I can rejigger my brain chemistry to replicate the sensation of fulfilling a promise. There's a way in which I should be able to put myself under a machine, an MRI, that then will tell me what I dreamed last night, or like the quality of my memory. But that's just not how any of this works. It's just kind of a paraphrase that we've told ourselves about how the mind works. The mind works. Right? So we can give you pills that will tell you, that will make you not care that you didn't fulfill the promise, but there'll be no pill that will make you feel like you actually did what you're supposed to do, because there's an ideological component that actually runs matter, right? So I don't know. If you're gonna go to therapy, go to talk therapy first, because talk therapy might actually do something. People who just want to put pills in you immediately, they might not be interested in your problem in the right way. So, but the materialists will say that actually, it's the stuff that matters more than the ideas. The problem is the stuff is particular. The stuff is me. Right? I'm made out of this. And if that's all that matters, I'll never risk this for a greater ideal. Meanwhile, on the other side, they'll live and die for freedom, because it's not the life that matters, it's the way of life. So the materialists will always, I think, will always be proved wrong, because things don't work. Like if you try to reduce all of our ideas and notions and normativity, what we think is right, to like bodies impinging on each other, then you'll get a very degraded notion of what meaning is, because you can't turn that kind of notion of humanity into meaning. You can't turn that into meaning. So these materialists they'll kind of always lose to people who actually are willing to fight and die for things. And we'll have a hard time in general turning material into meaning, because that might be a red herring. Right? So the sentimental left, also the sentimental materialist left will say, like, well, if you just need to give people happiness, you just need to give them a little bit of pleasure and some money. They don't need to be productive. They don't need to actually do anything to have meaning in their life. They just need comfort. And that's not true. That's simply not true. You need a productive place, a recognized productive place to understand yourself as, a contributing member to a civil society that promotes freedom. So the idea that, and this is I call them the suburban left. The white left from company money, the white left from not company money, from family money, has kind of the most sentimentalist, like naively materialist politics in the world. One, they don't believe in work. They think, I think Stoller said, they think strawberries come come from grocery stores. They don't understand the importance of production for sustaining our freedom. But 2, they think we should have these great policies because that's just being nice to people. Students are under debt. We should free their debt because that's just bad. That's just mean. Well, no, we should forgive their debt because they took on that debt as a matter of fraud. They were defrauded by, the entire media industry during the 90s, the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s that told you that good debt was always going to be paid. There's an entire propaganda industry. I remember watching A Different World, and I almost went to Howard because of A Different World. I liked Kim, the one who was going to be the doctor. I thought she was lovely. But I was like, I want to go to, but I ended up going to a public school out in California. But A Different World, that was propaganda saying that go to one of these HBCUs, even the private ones, and they'll pay for, the loans you take out will be worth it because at the end you'll end up making more money. I bet you A Different World has caused more student loan debt than, I don't know, divorce. No. A lot of people took out loans because they were defrauded by propaganda because that's how we make our plans. And if freedom is what I've talked about in other shows, freedom is our ability to make plans and then enact them. The stuff we make plans out of is the information that's given to us by the media. That's so if media is saying insistently that you need to go to college to become somebody. Everybody tells black people, well, the problem with black, if you're going to be black, you just need to educate yourself. And the truth is through education. So these black people went to college, took out student loans, and now are paying off student loans for jobs that aren't going to pay them back. And I think a lot of that is a matter of fraud. Look, if we bailed out the bankers in 2008, and they have all of these distorted incentives to sign people up for loans and then pass the loans on to bigger brokers or bigger banks, then we should bail out students who had all of these perverse incentives to take out loans. I personally paid off my loans about 2 years ago, but that's just a matter of luck. And I went to a public school, and most of my loans are for my master's program. So that's... My individual experience does not negate the proper claim to just forgive these loans. These loans are a matter of fraud. Sure, the nation was confused about the value of a college education, but that confusion ends up on the balance sheet of a lot of vulnerable people, while a lot of other people just say, oops. So I want to clear off the balance sheet of those vulnerable people who are, I think, suborned into a misrepresentation of the value, monetary value, and return of a college education. So that's why you forgive loans, not because you feel sorry for people. No, but because they were defrauded as a matter of right. They were punished for making plans based on the information they were given, and they were punished for making plans based on the information they were given, and punishing people for making plans about their life is pretty much punishing people for aspiring to be free. Because freedom is a matter of being able to make plans and then enact them. So in order for you to be able to make plans and enact them, the world has to play along, or at least be honest about the stuff out of which you make plans. All right, so you see the difference in the arguments? You don't, these arguments. Okay, I'll fix them at another time, okay? My kids' shoes are broken. So the arguments can't be... So the arguments for freedom are going to be more powerful, and also they're going to be more stable than the arguments for just they feel bad. I feel bad. Yeah, go ahead and go ahead, Graham. I'm going to ask you once nicely, okay? You're going to go upstairs and let me finish my show, all right? Thank you. I want you to, and I'll be right with you afterwards, all right?
What's your dad work?
All right. So the arguments for freedom are going to be more powerful than the arguments for example, want. right? Like that's, and just expecting people to feel sorry for you and to use their power in government to assuage you because they feel sorry for you is not only naive, it's just it's fundamentally unstable. Right? You want to be certain in your rights, not depend on someone else's feelings. And so the six-figure left, or the family money left, or the suburban left, who wants to be able to build an entire movement out of compassion is ridiculous. Especially when the other side is building their movement out of like right, out of freedom, and is willing to fight for it. No, we need to talk in terms of freedom, and we need to talk in terms of like the structures of freedom and the institutions of freedom that are wanting in the United States. And just depending on like feeling sorry for the homeless person, that's a fundamentally inappropriate place to do politics. And it will always lose to the people who are willing to fight and die for an idea, if that idea is of fundamental meaning, which, it's not going to be pleasure, it's going to be freedom. All right, so the sentimental left is always going to be a disaster. I think it's politics for people who actually don't want to do the hard work of politics, and we need to get our arguments right. Like dramatizing the struggle might get you the microphone, but the sustaining power of your policies is going to be tying it to right, and not to like someone's feelings or someone's arbitrary passions. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope we talk more about arguments and less about like appealing to people's sympathies, and we talk about arguments about how to structure society to be actually self-determining, and empower people, and then enabling conditions of them actually engaging in meaningful work, rather than just, life as a form of pain reduction, harm reduction. All right, that's not a serious politics. All right, so thank you for your time, and I hope this has been helpful. I'm not a fan of the sentimental left. I think it's particular. I think it individualizes political feelings. I think it particularizes political feelings, and then ultimately, if you want to turn life into something meaningful, it's not going to be through it's not going to be through sentimentality. It's going to be through enabling freedom for both you and other people around you. All right, thank you for your time, and I will talk to you later. Peace.